lot of discussion always about just general testing and PCR testing, whether you should test asymptomatic people, just symptomatic, how many contacts. Dr. Bhattacharya, what is the this asymptomatic testing with PCR? But particularly, I think one of the things that's been put out, the New York Times had an article about a month ago looking at some of the test results in New York and in, I believe, Nevada and Massachusetts. And they found that because the PCR tests are so sensitive, that up to 90% of the positives were not identifying live infectious virus. And then I think there's other studies that have come out. I know Oxford's Center for Evidence-Based Medicine says that if you have such high sensitivity, you cannot be there's no guarantee you're even identifying live virus. And I think that, I guess, one, just what does that mean for some of the testing and the case numbers that we see? But then two, it seems to me that if you're test positive with no symptoms with a very sensitive PCR test, and they can't even tell you if you're infectious, we're quarantining across the country probably hundreds of thousands or millions of people who aren't even contagious. And I think that obviously has a huge cost to society. Doesn't seem to be getting a lot of discussion, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point. And actually, Dr. Levitt's a biologist, so he can tell us all about the PCR technology. But the key thing about the PCR technology that I think is important for this discussion is that essentially you were doubling the genetic material if it's present, of the virus if it's present, right? If you have a very tiny amount of the virus, or if it's a viral fragment that's not actually that your body has successfully attacked, your immune system is successfully attacked, then what you're amplifying is something that's not going to pose any risk either to you or to others. So you're asymptomatic. The PCR, you're positive with the PCR. It's not a false positive in a technical sense, but in a functional sense, it's a false positive. Epidemiologically, it's a false positive, right? I'm not going to infect you, even though I have this even though I'm PCR positive, because it took so many doublings to reach the point that we can infer that there really wasn't very much genetic material for the virus present to begin with. I think that you're absolutely right to point out the cost of that when you attach it to a policy of contact tracing and isolation and quarantine. We effectively are quarantining people on the basis of PCR tests, a functional false positive PCR tests, where it will have no effect on disease spread because they're not infectious, and at the same time will impose enormous costs on them. Actually, there's another follow-on cost to that, is that it makes people less willing to cooperate with contact tracers because they know the costs. If I am contact traced and I'm asked to say who I've interacted with, I know if I say I interact with my friends, they're going to be facing the same thing. They might get quarantined, and if it's likely it's possible as a false positive, a functional false positive, then I'm imposing cost on them for nothing. I think in LA County, I saw an LA Times story that 60% of people who are contacted, who put in touch with contact tracers, they won't cooperate with them. And you can see why. The cost of essentially ratting your friends out is enormous.